Okay, so I'm going to do a demo today covering some of the basics of using a reference mesh that we obtained from a 3D scan of someone's body parts in Solidworks to then model something using surfaces. First, I'm going to find one of those scans, which I think I have in here. Custom fit, 3D scans, and who has a leg or an arm that came in pretty good? Like, yours was like both legs, right?
I have a foot.
You have a foot, maybe not a foot.
Mine's the forearm.
Forearm, Dexter's arm was pretty good. I think yours came out pretty well too. All right, let's try one of those. Which one was open, Eunice? Which one was open? Like not flexed? Is this one? Okay. All right, so I'll go over bringing a reference mesh in as well. These things, what? I did not mean to open that. All right, so I'm going to start a new part first. New part, as per usual. We're working in millimeters, and then I'm going to import, let's see. Maybe I'll just start by opening it. Okay, so I'm going to navigate to my meshes, 3D scans, and pick one of these. Now remember, these are STLs, and in order to get the extra options for importing an STL, you got to pick STL down here, STL file type. Then you can open up the options menu and import it as either a solid, surface, or graphics body. We talked about this before, but I'll say it one more time. We're going to use the graphics body as an option as the option to import this mesh data. One, because the mesh data has a ton of little polygons, and if we imported it a different way, it would totally bog down our computer. And two, because really we're only using this as a sort of a 3D reference anyway. We're not going to actually be like pushing and pulling points or doing anything with the mesh. So graphics body is fine. The unit should be millimeters because that's the unit that we picked when we exported the 3D scan. So we're just going to say OK. And then open. I found out recently that there is an add-on, an add-in for SolidWorks that's called, actually, no, I'm going to check for that too really quick. Called Scan to 3D. So this thing, I'm going to try this as well. Scan to 3D lets you import a mesh as something a little bit different. It's kind of a blend between surfaces and not surfaces that'll let you get things like section views. And while you guys are watching this, I haven't tried this before, but I learned about it at Priority this week. And let's see what happens. So I'm going to go ahead and try to open that same file as a mesh file. Okay. Before we were just saying STL. This time this new option doesn't pop up unless you enable that add-on called Scan to 3D. So I'm going to say mesh files. We're going to use Eunice again. What options? Cool, it's a different option thing. It looks like I'm just going to say OK and see what happens here. Yes, OK. It's like it came in with an error. I don't even know what that means. But, all right, so you'll notice the difference here is this first file that we opened where we imported Eunice and her arm, it came in as an STL graphics. And if we do anything like sectioning, like nothing happens to this graphics. It's almost like a 3D photo underlay. We can't really do anything with it. We can't measure it, but it's there. With mesh data, you can see in the feature tree, it counts as mesh. And I believe we can do some cool things like actually getting a section view. So if we knew we wanted that shape of that part of Eunice's arm, we can do it, which is actually kind of cool. So maybe that's useful, maybe it's not. If you guys want to experiment with that, what's that? Let's try it. Can we use the move tool and reorient it? It doesn't, it's not a body, it doesn't show up as a surface or solid body, so maybe not. And again, I don't know why it's showing me this as being an error. What's wrong? It has errors. That's what's wrong. Cool. So again, this is a reference mesh thing. I'm going to just go ahead and use the STL graphics underlay because that's what most of you will be able to do. Anyway, all right, so let me switch back over to that other file. And actually, I wanted the arm open, but screw it. We'll do it bent. That's fine. We'll just use this. Okay, so I have my mesh data, and let's say I'm making some sort of arm cast thing. I don't know what Unis is making. It doesn't really matter at this point. For most of what you guys are making, we're going to try and use the shape of this part of the human body as an underlay to create something that is a custom fit, right? That's the whole point of this assignment. And a lot of this project comes down to setting up some sort of base surface that reflects the shape of whatever human part that we scanned in, and then using that base surface as sort of like a home base for setting up other surfaces. Offsets, doing trims, adding things, subtracting things, whatever. I don't have a sketch that I'm working off of. Normally, that's something that I would do, is a quick sketch about what I'm going to try to build. So I'm going to wing it right now just to kind of show you a few of the tools that I would use. First thing first, I find it's helpful to have some sort of axis, some sort of line that runs through like the plane of Unis's arm in this case. So right now, like my front, top, and right planes don't really have a lot to do with the arm that I'm going to be building on, so I'm going to set up some new planes. So I might have to use a couple sketches to do that. Like I'm going to sketch on the top plane really quick, a line that runs roughly through Unis's arm, like that. Okay, that's one thing. And maybe I want... Actually, let me look back at the top. Maybe I want this to kind of end at her elbow, roughly. That's good enough for me, so I'm going to get out of here. All right, what does that line give me? It's going to give me a brand new plane. So I'm going to add a new reference plane, use this line, and the tip, get a plane here. Like that. Okay, so now I have a plane that kind of is intersecting Unis's arm. Okay, that's one. I might go back into this sketch, actually, and add another line to that same like plane setup sketch. That is, and I'm gonna fix this in place because I kind of just eyeballed it. I'm gonna make these perpendicular. Get out of here. And I'm gonna use that other line to create another plane. Right there. So there's my second plane. This plane should cut all the way through Unis's arm. Now, I might find it useful to draw on this second plane that I just created another line. So I'm going to square up to that plane and draw a line that's like in line with where I'd imagine Unis's bone is in her arm. And you know what? I might as well go ahead and draw both of these. These are going to be kind of like the central axis of her arm. All right, is it exact? No, but I'm using this as a reference, right? So, and I can always adjust these lines later on, and they should move my planes around. Okay, so I've got a couple more lines. Now, one thing you'll notice is reference mesh is opaque. If you want to get rid of it, you can right-click and say hide. And now I'm going to add a couple more planes here. I'm going to add a plane at the edge there. And I think I'm going to probably end up using this plane instead of my plane 1, so I'm just going to hide that. And I will probably also make a plane here. That's sort of looking up the second part, like Unis's forearm. Okay, so I've got a right plane that is in line with this plane, which is in line with, you know, the side of Eunice's arm. I have this plane number 3, which is kind of in line with the front of Eunice's arm. The last plane that I think would be useful is one that cuts straight through, kind of flat on Eunice's arm. And I think probably I can do that with one more sketch. So if I sketch on this plane a line that intersects, just comes out nice and perpendicular. Oops, actually I don't want to do it that way. Get out of here. I think I wanted to sketch on this plane. Line that goes like straight up and down. I think that's vertical. Nope, not horizontal. Vertical. Let me get out of here. Make one more plane. Uses that line and that point. Okay, there we go. So I got a whole bunch of planes. Could you build things around this using 3D sketches and the planes you had to start with? Probably. Is this going to make it easier to move forward? Definitely. This is going to give me a much easier time like placing sketches in areas that I think are going to be useful. Okay, so first things first, let's say I'm trying to do some sort of guard cast thing on, and we're going to start with just like this main upper part of Eunice's arm. So I might start by trying to make a loft with a couple profiles that kind of outline the shape of Eunice's arm. Not a bad way to start, right? You could start a number of different ways, but this might be a good way to do it because Eunice's arm looks like I could make, like kind of guess at the sections that go through it. So I have my first section here, plane 3. I'm going to add a couple more planes. I'm just going to make this arbitrary. Like maybe I'll put a plane like right there because her arm kind of changes shape. Like right there. I'm going to make another plane. Like, yeah, sure, that looks pretty good. There. And then maybe we'll go up her shoulder a little bit too. So one more plane. Yeah, sure, that looks great. And this is a good time to check. Like, do all those planes cut through her arm? It looks like it. If they didn't, I could always go back to one of my setup sketches and tweak one of those lines to make sure everything's sort of offset the way I like. You guys with me so far? Okay. I am going to turn off some of these setup sketches because I'm not that interested in the lines themselves. I'm more interested in the planes they let me create. All right, let me save this as a demo on Eunice's apostrophes and file names on Eunice arm. Sure. Okay. All right, let's make some sections. I'm going to start with this one because it looks like it'll be the easiest. I'm going to start with, it looks like probably most of these sections I could make with, I could probably get close with an ellipse. If you wanted to go be a little more accurate, you could probably do something like building a custom section profile with a number of splines or design splines. You guys are familiar with splines and how you can make things. For this demo and for the sake of moving through it, I'm just going to use ellipses for now. But it would be the same process. I'm going to make sure the center of my ellipse is on that center axis, and I think maybe my mesh is preventing me from clicking that, so I'm just going to hide that really quick. Okay. Where are you, central axis? Okay, fine. I'll show that plane again for that sketch. So we know this goes through the center of all the planes. So I'm going to mate the center of this to my line. Apparently I got out of that sketch. Oh, now my axis is back. Jeez. What sketch is this? I'm going to hide that again. Okay. I just want to pick that. Let me pick it. No? I can do a Pierce relationship here. So my thing is in the middle. I'm going to right click and show my graphics body again. And now I might just like push and pull this until it's kind of close to the shape of Eunice's arm. And it looks like, yeah, I might have to change this a little bit too. So that relationship, for some reason it keeps booting me out of that sketch. I don't want that to be Pierce. I'm going to move this down a little bit closer to the bottom. I could always put in a construction line that I can then add dimensions to make sure, let's see, I can like change this later. I'm trying to get the middle of my ellipse in the middle of her arm. That's looking pretty close. Maybe I want to keep this ellipse upright, so I'm going to add a vertical relationship, unless it doesn't like it. Okay, so I'm just going to eyeball it. Okay. Getting a little bit closer. Looks like maybe the center of my ellipse needs to be a little bit higher. So maybe I'll change that to like 15 millimeters. And this process, because we're dealing with an organic shape, it might take some time to get it to fit right. You might want to start with something that's a little bit oversized so that any thickening and stuff that you do, you can kind of offset in toward the arm. It's really up to what your design is going to look like. Section it? Yeah, totally. Making a section view will give you a lot more fidelity on what those sections could look like. I don't want to, I can demo it for you guys again. I just don't want to rely on it because I'm not sure if everyone has that shortcut or that add-in. But yeah, if you have it, definitely use it because then you can see what it's supposed to look like. Okay, so that looks close enough for right now. Let me get out of here, and I'm going to do the same thing again on another plane. So another sketch, another ellipse, or whatever other shape that you want to do that isn't an ellipse. And for now, that's good enough because there's other cool stuff I want to show you guys. All right, so I'm just going to be happy with that. You know what? Why don't I do one more? Why don't we go... we'll go in here because then we can do some things with the elbow too. So I'm going to sketch here, do another ellipse. This one's probably a little bit smaller. And it's kind of off the end of her elbow. I might do another one of those construction lines and make sure that it connects to the middle of my ellipse. Make sure this is vertical. And something like that. Okay, we'll see how it looks here in a second. Okay, so I've got my 3 profiles. And you might want to spend some time tweaking these and making them a little bit closer. Another thing you might want to do is call each of these. Remember we talked about using a master sketch a lot. For the sake of being able to adjust this stuff after the fact, you might want to call these like master profile A and B and C. So I'm going to do that right now just so you can see what that process might look like. Master profile B, master profile C. I'm going to save, always save early, save often. And now we're going to actually set up a surface. So again, with master sketches, it's a little more work to start. So I'm going to have to create a new sketch on each one of these planes and just copy over each one of these circles, ellipses. Doesn't take that long. Click the plane, make a new sketch, convert the entity, pick it, right-click to say OK, and you're done. Sketch, convert, that thing, good, get out of that. Okay, when I'm doing this surface, I might hide my original sketches so I don't actually accidentally pick them when I make my surface. And now I think I'm going to do just a lofted surface. Now remember, I'm building these with surfaces. A lot of what you're doing is probably going to be surfaces, so be sure to pick the lofted surface, not the lofted boss or base. It's easy to fix. You just delete it if you make it with a boss base. But you want this thing to be a surface, not a solid. Okay, so I'm going to do a lofted surface. What profiles? Usually helps to pick them in order. That one, and that one. And we get a little preview. Cool. Okay, we're off to a start. I don't know if it's the best start, but it's certainly a start. Now let's talk a little bit about adjustability. So I did my first pass here. It looks like I'm close on part of her arm, but it looks like I'm missing like the outside part of her elbow here. So how do I adjust this? Well, I can show my master sketches again, and I can find that one here, and I can adjust it. So if I go back into this sketch, and whether it's by dimensions or just pushing and pulling, I should be able to adjust that profile, get out of the sketch, and have the surface update. And it did update. It looks like I might have to tweak it a little bit more. That's kind of the process I would go through until you get a surface that's pretty close. All right, so this thing that I'm building on Unisys Design, I'm not sure what it is yet, but I'm going to start hacking into it and creating my design. Okay, so at some point, and you might run through this process 2 or 3 times, depending on how many different areas of the body you need to create a thing on. Right now, I'm just going to go with this chunk of Unisys arm before I build something on the other part and then worry about connecting them later. I have my baseline surface. It took me a little bit of time to set it up. I spent a lot of time tweaking it to make it look like it should fit Unis. That's good. Now, the rest of it is a little bit more fun. We're going to do a whole bunch of surface operations to start building out our design. A lot of them are going to be sketches on planes that we're going to use to trim or split our surface. And then we're going to do a bunch of offsetting and other operations to start building out what this design could look like. All right, so first things first, I want to hack off part of this surface so that there's room for me to then blend it to another part of something later on. I want to get rid of this part of the surface. So is there a plane I can sketch on? Yeah. Remember I set up this right plane down here. I'm going to sketch on it, square up to it, and I'm going to trim. So, and at this point, I might just put something in that's kind of arbitrary. If, again, with all of this stuff, you can add dimensions to make sure that as you tweak things, those dimensions are going to hold true or adjust by creating relations between a surface that you've built and the sketch. That's up to you guys to try and build in that complexity if you think it's necessary. All right, so that's my line. And I can say, for my surfaces tab, trim surface. In order to trim with a sketch, you want to use a standard trim. And you want to pick the trim tool if it isn't already chosen. I'm going to use that sketch that I just created. Now I have an option to keep or remove selections. Well, let's say I want to keep that selection and say OK. I just hacked off part of my surface. That's good because that's the part that I wanted to keep. OK, so I'm one step closer to whatever this thing is supposed to be. All right, now let's say I wanted to add some like cool pad designs on the back of Eunice's arm because Eunice is going to be slamming the back of her arm into things when she does the thing that we're designing for. I don't know what that is yet, but sure, it's a pad. A lot of you guys are dealing with like protective equipment, so I'll show you one approach to making a pad. All right, so I'm going to draw from maybe like this view, and I already set up a plane. It looks like the plane I want to draw on is this guy right here. This one I set up for the other part of her arm, so maybe I'll just hide that for now. I'm going to save one more time. All right. So I'm going to sketch on this plane, part of my design. I don't want to see the top of her arm. I want to see the bottom of her arm. Okay. So let's do some shapes. Maybe, what do I want these pads to look like? Maybe I'll do some style splines where I jump out, kind of do this kind of shape here, and maybe I'll end up mirroring this stuff. Okay, so some things that I do kind of in my head as I'm setting up shapes if I know that I'm going to mirror a shape, a smooth shape, I'm going to try and make sure that whatever line I'm going to mirror it across, in this case it might be this line, which I can convert from another sketch. Let me turn that into a construction line. That my curves are going to be perpendicular to that line. So in this case, I could say make that vertical. I can make this guy vertical, and that way I know the other side of the shape is going to line up nice and smooth too when I move it. One reason I like design splines is I can like easily push and pull these handles after the fact, really tweak this shape and make it exactly what I'm trying to do. Okay, so that's something. I'm going to treat this as a master sketch. So maybe this pad, I've got like a stretchy neoprene, like, I don't know, sleeve that fits on Eunice's arm, and then on the back side of it, I have like a thicker pad that's like foam, and then on top of that, I'm going to do a couple smaller sections that are like hard plastic. Sure, similar to what some like, you know, baseball protective gear might look like. So this, I'm guessing, is what I'm going to use for like the padded area. I'm going to do a couple more shapes on my master sketch here that are like roughly offsets of this shape that I'm going to use to make some like articulated pad shapes. And this is where, if you have a sketch of the bottom view of whatever it is you're trying to design, it will come in helpful because you're not like guessing at shapes anymore. You're actually building what you sketched. Okay, so you guys see maybe what I'm talking about here, as I'm making this up as I go. All right, again, I'm going to make sure that all of these connection points are going to line up nice and smooth by making them vertical in this case. And if I don't like how these shapes are offsetting, I can kind of tweak them a little bit to make it closer. This is where you can really get into the like the nitty-gritty of how you want your design to look. Okay, let's see, maybe this one is a little square like that. Now notice when you drag things around, it wants to try and add relations. Just be mindful, because sometimes, especially when you're dragging like style spline lines around, you can accidentally add relations that mess everything up later. Just keep an eye out. If it adds something you don't want, click on that relation and delete it before it becomes an issue. Okay, again, these are shapes that if I wanted, I could dimension and make sure that when stuff updates, they don't change and errors crop up later. At this point, I'm just going through and kind of building the shapes as close as I can. Okay, so that's my master sketch. You know what? Maybe I'm going to add a couple more little things here that could be like cool details that happen on top of each of these pads later on. And maybe I'll just do it on one of them because I think you guys will get the idea. So I'm adding a couple more relations, making sure this stuff is going to translate across my mirror line nice and easy. And okay, I'm double checking that all of these points are connected to my mirror line. If they're not, we'll run into issues. Okay, I'm pretty happy with this right now. This, I'm going to get out of this sketch. I'm going to save because I just spent a whole lot of time on that sketch. And I'm going to call this my like master pad shapes underside, or something that will remind me what the heck is in this sketch later on. Okay. Now, because it's a master sketch, remember I'm going to convert the entities that I want to use out of this master sketch. And because I'm working with a base surface, this like pad, this outer line, I'm thinking is going to be like an offset of that surface that might be a padded area. I'm going to start by using an offset surface of my main surface. Just like a master sketch, this baseline surface that we created, I don't ever really want to mess with it that much. I might hide it, I might make copies of it, I might trim copies of it and stuff, but that way if I ever need to go back to the original one, I've got a clean copy of it somewhere. All right, so how thick is my foam? Let's say 3 millimeters. That's a great amount of foam. So I don't mess it up, I'm going to call my baseline surface and I'm going to hide it because right now I don't want to mess with it. Now I'm going to create a new sketch on the same plane as my master sketch, convert some of these design elements like my mirror line and the outer portion here. I'm going to mirror this over that. I'm going to turn that into a construction line because I don't need it to trim my surface. And now I'm going to use this to trim my surface. So I'm going to go back to my surface tab, say trim surface, pick standard if it wasn't already standard because I'm using a sketch to trim a surface, and keep the sections I want. I want that. Okay, so there it is. Cool. That's part of it. What does it look like with the rest of my surface? Interesting. Okay, so I've got this like cool unis arm shaped pad thing sticking off the top of my surface. You guys can. What was the purpose of the convert entities thing? So you'll notice this master sketch here where I did all of my work, it's still there and I can still see it. Because I created another sketch, converted the entities I wanted out of my master sketch, and used that to trim my surface. If I wanted to go back in here to my master sketch and like move stuff around, I could, without like digging into a bunch of features and like finding what sketch created what feature. It's kind of a way for me to keep all of my geometry in one sketch and only use the parts of it that I need when I create, each offset surface. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do it again here for another thing. So, all right, so I've got my like foam area. Now I'm going to do these like other hard areas as an offset here. So I could make another offset of my baseline surface. I actually think I could probably just use an offset of this surface. So I'm going to offset that another, sure, maybe this one's a little bit thicker, another 4 millimeters. See, I've got an offset surface there. I'm going to hide the one that I don't want to edit. And now I'm going to trim this surface using just these two parts of my master sketch. So I'm going to make a brand new sketch on the same plane as my master. I'm going to convert those entities that I want out of that master sketch and that mirror line too. I'm going to mirror both of those over the center so I get a complete shape. Make sure the center line is construction geometry so it doesn't cut through my surface as well. And then same process, trim my surface. Standard, I'm using that sketch I just created. I'm going to keep that section and that section. There they are. And if I show my other body and my baseline surface, you can see how my design is starting to take shape, right? You guys with me so far? Okay. And I'm going to do it one more time for those 2 extra details on top of this surface, because why not? So, same thing. I'm going to pick that surface, make an offset. Maybe this one's even thicker for some reason. Okay, there it is. I'm going to create a brand new sketch on my master plane, convert the 2 entities that I want. Oh, I forgot. I should convert that mirror line. I'm going to mirror both of these guys across this, and then I'm going to turn my mirror into construction, go back to surfaces, trim, and notice like I could trim that same shape out of any of these surfaces, but I only want to do it off of that top surface. So you can leave these other surfaces visible if you want, or if you want to trim multiple surfaces with the same sketch, that's totally fine. I tend to like to hide things that that I don't want to mess up, so that I don't mess them up. Okay, so that's good. There they are. Okay, so I'm starting to get my design here. We could keep going the same way and build lots of complexity into this shape by this simple process of offsetting from our base surface or the surfaces we've created and trimming them with sketches or other surfaces. And you guys have done a lot of this stuff in the past. Other things still apply here. For example, if you wanted some other complex shape, like running across the top of one of these that isn't as simple as trimming an offset of a surface, go for it. You can build whatever surfaces you want here and then cut them together, trim them, intersect them. This is just some specific stuff that's useful when we're talking about using a reference mesh and a baseline surface. Okay, so I'm going to save again. I'm pretty happy with this. At some point, you're going to want to start to turn your design change it from surfaces back into solids, right? So it looks like it has thickness. You can apply materials to it and eventually bring it into keep that, right? So there are a lot of ways that you can do that. In this case, I lost it, so I'm going to press F to recenter. I might do some simple thickens. So I'll thicken up. Remember, I don't want to delete my baseline surface, so before I thicken that, I'm actually going to make a copy. I'll go to direct editing, move copy bodies, make a copy, say okay, yeah, I didn't move it or anything, that's fine, and then hide my baseline surface. Again, keep your baseline surface around for later, because you can always like offset it again to make cuts or whatever else. All right, so let's do some thickens. I want to thicken that guy. I want to thicken it inward because it's kind of bigger than Eunice's arm right now. Let's say that neoprene sock, if I had some neoprene around, I could measure it. Let's say it's probably like 2 or 3 millimeters. That's fine. We'll thicken it. Okay, so I've got that. These I can thicken as well. And probably I want to go so that it intersects the next part below it just slightly, because eventually I can merge things together if they're kind of overlapping. I don't want to merge these yet, so I'm going to just say don't merge them. And, oh yeah, what surface am I thickening? That one. Okay, so that's part of it. These guys I want to thicken as well. Those I offset quite a bit more. So that one, can I thicken more than one at the same time? No, I don't want to merge it. Thicken, don't merge, okay. Because that was like my foam. These are my hard parts, and these things too. I might thicken these. 5.1. And maybe this one I do merge, and I never say auto select. I pick exactly what I want to merge it with. Oh yeah, what surface? That surface. Okay. There, it merged it. Thicken. Merge it with that one. Okay. All right, so I've got some shapes. Now we can build in some even some more complexity. So one way I like to build complexity into shapes like this is with a series of like chamfers on a surface. You get some really nice like offset shapes, and a lot of soft goods you'll see near the edge of surfaces, you'll see like a double line from like a nice fillet or a chamfer that's been filleted. I'll show you what I'm talking about here in a second. So I'm going to save one more time. And another thing that's probably good to do, after you do most of your surface design, I would group your stuff into a folder and just say like, this was surface build for upper arm. And that way you can keep your feature tree a little bit cleaner and it's easier to find stuff. After you thicken everything, I would put all of that in a folder as well and say like, this was thickens for the upper arm, right? And that way you can also see like, if you change something early in the feature tree and stuff explodes, stuff goes red, an entire folder might be okay, and you know that you don't have a problem with your thickens. Everything that's going wrong is somewhere in your surface build, or vice versa. Okay. So yeah, let's add some complexity with some chamfers. So I'm going to take this edge here, and I'm going to mess around with it a little bit. So let's say 3 millimeters, and I'm going to do like a 75 degrees. Maybe that's a little too much, so reduce it down. Maybe reduce it down again. Let's go to like 1 millimeter. That's pretty cool. Okay. Right? I don't know. That makes me happy when something like that happens. All right, that's something. It looks more like a foamy edge. Nice. Eventually, we've talked about things like aesthetic fillets. Bigger design features, I would suggest adding them first. So like your chamfers, if it's a big design feature, go ahead and do that first. Maybe this is like millimeters here. Oh, that's cool. I'm gonna do that too. Right, this is starting to look more like shelled kind of areas. And again, if you've seen this stuff before, you can kind of plan for that complexity in your sketches too, right? Like, oh, I saw this, or I couldn't figure out how to build in this like faceted kind of warpy surface. Well, the same kind of complexity, you guys, I know that you can build when you're doing solids on like a square form where you can just like hack it together with chamfers and fillets. You can do that on a form that was based off of offset surfaces as well, and you can get some really cool stuff to happen. These, sure, go nuts. Should let me do both of them. Maybe these, I'm going to go for a slightly sharper angle. It kind of domes them out a little bit more. And you might find that it doesn't give you the aesthetic that you want, and that's fine too. You can find some other way to build it. One way that I like to do this, so let's say I wanted this piece to look really domed, but I don't really want that like filleted, chamfered look. I don't want that surface. I can go in with a fillet to sort of taper the edge. I'm sorry, a chamfer to taper the edge, and then a really big fillet to kind of smooth it out, like 25 millimeters. No, that's not going to work. Let's try 20. Cool. And now when this renders, you're really not going to see any edge between here, but it will look like this surface is kind of doming out a little bit more than the surface underneath it. These guys?
Yeah, is it possible to adjust for...
Yeah. All right, we'll try that out next. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, cool. All right, I'll show that then, I guess, too. Thanks for looking into that. Okay. Come on, SolidWorks. Be thinking hard. What Dexter said was, if you manage to import your mesh as a mesh file, not just an STL, after you've activated the Scan to 3D add-on, so that you can kind of see the sections and stuff, if you right-click that feature in the feature tree, it should give you options to translate. Oh, right-click the mesh itself. SolidWorks and its hidden menus. Fun. Okay, I don't know what's going on here. So we've been saving. I'm just going to go ahead and kill it. I'm impatient. Alright, so let's go back to custom fit. Open this sucker up and see how much I lost. And then we'll try and tie what you were asking, which is, can you adjust the master sketch and see how stuff updates? Ah, none of my fillets happen. Okay. But I'm going to add some of those back in really quick, just because it would be cool to see those update as well. I'm sorry, my chamfers. What was this? Like 1.5 and like 30 degrees. Oh, 75 the other way. Cool. Oh, this one's the edge. And actually, those wanted to go 60. Okay, I'm going to save. Okay, so the power of the master sketch, we're going to take a look at that again right now. I should be able to go back into, where did I put that? Is it in my surface build? Yeah, my master pad shapes. Go back in and edit the sketch. So, I don't know, what do you want to change? How do you want this to change? Maybe I want that top pad to be significantly larger than the bottom pad. Like, I want this to come way down here. Maybe get, oops, that's the outside. Maybe I want the outside pad to be a little bigger too, sure. kind of change my shape up a little bit. I want the second pad to be kind of like significantly bigger as well. Whatever your reason is, you want these shapes to match up a little bit more nicely. Maybe that's what I want. Okay, let's see if it updates. And let's work through the errors if we get errors. Okay, so I'm going to hit Control Q and let it do a full rebuild. And that took care of it. So sometimes, what did I just do there? Yeah, sometimes when you update things way early in a feature tree and you get a bunch of errors, especially if they're yellow errors, SolidWorks just needs you to force the document to rebuild all the way. So you can either come up here to this little stoplight and say rebuild, or you can hit Control Q, which normally quits any other application. Control Q on a PC forces your document to rebuild from scratch everything you've already done. And it got rid of all the errors for me. Cool, and now you can see my shapes are a little bit different. And I can also see, like maybe it's a little pointier down there, so I might go back in and massage that shape a little bit more. Okay, so hopefully this little bit of demo was helpful to you guys. We went over a few different things, setting up a baseline surface, tweaking it to make sure it sort of matches and conforms to part of your scan, your body scan, adjusting things after the fact with a master sketch to try and double check that your scan looks right, using sketches in different planes that we set up to trim copies and offsets of my baseline surface to build in those layers and complexity. And I think with this process in mind, you guys should be able to set up a lot of the types of surfacing that you're going to want to do. And if you have questions about it or whatever, when I come around, ask. And again, like I've mentioned time and time again, like try to sketch it out. Try to sketch out your process. Can you take your design and dissect it on paper the way that you might try to build it? Do that first, and I promise it will help you. I still do that. All right, so for now, I'm just going to save this and stop the record. Any other questions, I guess, before I stop the recording that you want, like, on this? Surfacing stuff? No? Okay, cool. If you're still feeling a little bit, like, not so confident about what it is you're intending to design, that's fine, too. That's the point of this class, is to push you guys to get in and figure stuff out on your own. Use what you can to hack it together. I mean, a lot of design modeling is a total hack job. It's trying to build something that will tell the story of what it is we're designing at a higher level of fidelity. An engineer might chew this up. So, okay.